Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So we're breaking down the 4-game MLB DFS slate for today on Draftkings. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate that. I know the MLB season is just about over, but I do cover other sports as well, including the NFL and NASCAR. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new videos. And if you don't follow me over on social media, the handle is on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And if you want some more content over on Patreon, that's obviously always much appreciated. And you get access to all these spreadsheets that I post. But don't do anything for baseball because, like I said, this season is just about over. But I have it for the other sports as well. And you can hop into the Discord chat it up with all the members, and you can just ask me questions directly if you choose to do so. So if you're interested, links down below. If not, that's fine. Let's just dive into today's slate. So it's honestly a tricky slate from a pitching standpoint because I don't like any of these guys, to be honest. I don't really like Chris Paddock versus the Dodgers at all. I just think he's a respectable pitcher, so I have him on here. Sixto Sanchez, he's good, but do I like the matchup versus Atlanta? I do not. Christian Javier, 7,700. He's not even a confirmed starter yet. So I'm not sure I think he's going to be the starter, and if he is, 7,700, not bad as long as he's going to get a full workload here. And then Kyle Wright, 7,200. I just don't think he's a very good pitcher. Miami actually has beat him up twice so far this season. It was actually quite recently. Past few games have been fine for him, and it's the softest matchup on the slate versus Miami, but I just can't trust the guy. So we'll see how this goes. And if we look at the other projected pitchers on this slate, now a couple of these guys aren't confirmed, so I'm just going by what DraftKings and Fangraphs have, and they actually seem to line up perfectly. So we'll just roll with this as of right now. It looks like Urias will be for the Dodgers, Montas for the Oakland A's, Paddock for the Padres, Sanchez for the Marlins, Javier for the Astros, Montgomery for the Yankees, Wright for the Braves, and Ryan Yarbrough for the Tampa Bay Rays as a long relief option. It looks like they're going to be using an opener, but a couple of these guys are not confirmed yet, but let's just roll with it as of right now. If things change, you guys should be able to adjust. But as of right now, let's just assume this is what it's going to look like. And really, I don't like any of these guys, to be honest. Like Urias, he's not going to pitch too deep. And I don't like the matchup versus the Padres. Montas, I don't really want to use anybody versus the Astros. So I'm going to probably cross him off my list. Chris Paddock, I think he's a good pitcher, but I don't think he's good enough to overcome a matchup versus the Dodgers, especially in the playoffs. If we're looking at his recent games, his past two games, he scored negative 9.6 points and negative 1.2 points. That's awful form, and I don't like that. It doesn't make me feel good. And he's actually faced the Dodgers twice this season. He scored negative 8.1 points, and that was on the road in LA. And then at home in San Diego, he had 18.5 fantasy points. So a little bit of a mixed bag there. I think LA should be able to get to him, but at 8,300, he's a respectable pitcher at least. He's got decent numbers if you're looking at them so far this season. 3.77 xFIP, a 24% K rate, a 5% walk rate. Does struggle a bit with power, which does not profile well versus the Dodgers team that's got plenty of power. But I think he's somewhat okay. I like the price tag, and it's okay. It's not going to get me too excited, but I think he's okay. Sixto Sanchez at 8,100. He's had two starts versus the Braves. One went very well, one went very poor, if I can pull up the game log. So September 23rd in Atlanta, he scored negative 2.1 points, only lasted 3 innings, striking out 2. And then earlier in the season, September 8th in Atlanta, once again, 26.5 fantasy points, struck out 6. I don't think he's going to get you negative 2 points. I don't think he's going to get you 26 points. I think we could probably meet somewhere in the middle. I do have some interest in some Braves bats, but again, we got to do some uncomfortable things on these DFS slates in the playoffs because it's just kind of hard to avoid a certain team, or sometimes we're forced to use pitchers that we normally wouldn't want to target on a certain slate. But Sixto, the guy is talented. He's got a 4.08 xFIP on the season, a 21% K rate. He's got electric stuff. He's got a 100-mile-per-hour fastball, only giving up 0.69 home runs per 9 innings. And the Braves are a team that will strike out it, but they do strike out more versus lefties with a 29% strikeout rate. But to the righties, still a 25.4% strikeout rate and only an 8% walk rate. Yeah, they have plenty of power. You got Acuna, Ozuna, Freddie Freeman, Dansby Swanson, Ozzy Albies. It's not a fun matchup here, but he's okay at 8,100. But again, I don't feel really comfortable with any of these guys. Christian Javier, 7,700. I think that price is fine. And he had a pretty decent season for the most part. Didn't really get blown up. His worst game of the year was his first start, but then went 1 inning where he had 3.7 points. Also on October 5th versus Oakland, he only went 1 inning and had 5.7 points. So we'll see how deep he goes into this game. Like, if they're going to give him a quick pull, obviously you're not going to use him at 7,700, but he's a talented pitcher, and I think he'll be fine to love the matchup versus the A's. But again, I don't really like any of these matches for the most part, and all these pitchers just don't really get me too excited. And I know it kind of strayed away from my YouTube pitchers sheet, but I don't really feel too comfortable with them, so I'm just kind of listing the whole entire group here. Jordan Montgomery, 7,400. I actually like some of these Tampa Bay Rays bats a little bit more than I like using Jordan Montgomery. It's 5.11 not xFIP this season. It's 5.11 ERA is much worse than his 3.65 xFIP, which is actually the best on the slate. Also owns a 24% K rate. I think he's okay if you're looking at how the Rays have done this season. They're striking out a 26% clip to lefties, and they're walking quite a bit. And I actually do like some of the righties on the Tampa Bay Rays, but I guess Montgomery would be okay, but I guess that's the nicest thing I can say. Kyle Wright, 7,200. He's had some pretty bad starts this season, and versus Miami, he actually hasn't fared well. Pull up his game log really quick. So in his 2 starts versus Miami, they were back-to-back. He scored -2 points and then 1.6 fantasy points. So it hasn't gone too well for him, but I assume that the Miami Marlins are going to have the lowest team total on this slate at 3.94. So I guess Kyle Wright is somewhat interesting. He's actually been decent his past 3 starts where he scored 15, 29, and 16 points. I think he'll be okay. I actually like some of the Marlins bats just for value, but I think Kyle Wright's okay at that price point. Then Ryan Yarbrough is going to be the projected long relief option, and he's okay. He's an alright pitcher, and that's just about all I can say about him. He's an alright pitcher, 4.33 xFIP. He's not great. He's not bad. He's kind of somewhere in the middle, 3.56 ERA. Doesn't really give up too much hard contact, but I like the matchup here versus New York Yankees. They have plenty of lefty matchers on this team, like the red-hot Giancarlo Stanton. You have Aaron Judge, Larry Torres, Luke Voit, and some other guys as well. So that's a bit of a tricky spot there for Yarbrough, but that's kind of my opinions on pitching. I kind of just quick hit all these guys. I don't really have a strong lean on any of them. I don't really think any of these guys are great options, so I guess just kind of throw in who fits at the end and just hope they don't get blown up for the most part and hope you nail your bats. So we'll move on to the bats, which I think are at least a little bit easier to digest. Now, keep in mind, some of these guys are not confirmed, so if things change, like if there's just a random lefty thrown in, that'll change some things, but you guys have to keep up with that. As of right now, these are the guys I'm assuming are in, but we'll start up top with, that's the hitter sheet, not the YouTube batter sheet. Sorry. It's like, that doesn't seem right. Mookie Betts is on a catcher. Okay, so anyway, Will Smith, 4,600 here. Going up presumably against Chris Paddock. I think that's who it's going to be. And so far this season, Will Smith has been very good versus righties, over a 300 ISO, 568 slugging, 158 WRC plus. Chris Paddock, I prefer lefties versus him, but I mean, I think the entire Dodgers lineup's fine here. They do hit right-handed pitching very well. It's just, I mean, Chris Paddock, I feel like he's maybe somewhat viable in this slate, but really tough spot versus the Dodgers. They got a lot of good bats. Travis d'Arnaud, 4,000. He's been hot the past couple of days here, and I assume the Braves are going to have one of the higher team totals on the slate. I'd imagine the Yankees are going to have a pretty high total versus Yarbrough since he's a lefty, and they got plenty of plenty of right-handed bats that can crush lefties. I could also see the Rays being up there as well, maybe a couple of other teams like the Dodgers. But I do like the Braves once again. Sixto Sanchez, not a guy I really want to pick on, but he's not completely unhittable here in d'Arnaud. He's been great versus righties this season. Very reverse splitsy with a 352 batting average and some overall very strong numbers. So I think d'Arnaud is fine. And then Kyle, I'm never sure how to say this guy's last name right. Is he Higashioka? I'm pretty sure. I mean, it sounds right. It sounds fun to say anyway, so we'll go with that. But anyway, Kyle, 2,900, like him here versus righty. He's cheap enough. Numbers versus lefties this season, not pretty. Negative 24 WRC plus, 154 batting average. Only 7% K rate though, but I mean, we can kind of chalk that up to a smaller sample size. He's not that bad. He's been actually pretty good versus righties. 420 ISO, again, smaller sample size, but I think he's okay just as a cheap Yankees bat, which I'll assume has one of, if not the highest team total on the slate. Dropping down to first base, a more fun position, we have Luke Voit at 5,200, who has been great versus lefties this season. Not the highest batting average in the world, but a near 450 ISO versus lefties. So Luke Voit, I think he's certainly in play for a Yankee stack. Freddie Freeman, 4,800, just going up against a righty. Freddie Freeman has been crushing right-handed pitching this season, which is nothing new for him. But a near 400 batting average to righties, a 373 ISO, over a 500 WOBA, which is insane, a 219 WRC plus, some very strong numbers for Freddie Freeman, so I think he is certainly viable. Then Jesus Aguilar at 3,100. I said Kyle Wright's interesting, and he is, but I can see a couple of these bats getting to him, and he's just not that great of a pitcher. A 415 WOBA to lefties compared to a 309 WOBA to righties. That's still pretty good for righties. but he's not a really of a high strikeout guy. He does walk more lefties, but I think the entire Marlins lineup is playable. If Kyle Wright's going to be popular, I think the Marlins would be a decent stack against him, but again, we can't get too picky on this slate with who we use at pitching because there's not that many good options. But I do like the price on the Marlins. And Jesus Aguilar, I prefer him versus lefties, but numbers versus righties, they're not great, but still a little bit of pop there. And he's not the worst batting average in the world at 268. I've seen worse for sure. Then dropping down to second base, he's also eligible at third base as well. But DJ LeMahieu, just if you're stacking up the Yankees, he's only got a 5% K rate to left-handed pitching this season. Not a ton of power, but we know he's going to hit for a high batting average and he's going to make contact. So DJ's fine. John Berti here at 2,500, just a cheap Marlins bat versus Kyle Wright. Looking at his numbers, 250 batting average to righties, and that's pretty much the nicest thing I can say about him. He strikes out quite a bit, doesn't really hit for power, but he's cheap at 2,500. I guess is somewhat weak position on this slate. Then Chad Pinder at 2,200. He had a nice game last night. I prefer him versus lefties, but he's cheap enough where at 2,200, it's fine. Just give me a hit or just get on base. Maybe you get a random RBI or you get a random run. I will take it at 2,200. Dropping down to third base. I just realized I have a lot of guys in the outfield here because it's a very strong position on this slate. But anyway, third base, Manny Machado, he went deep last night, and he should be facing another lefty here in Urias. Potentially, that could change, but he does hit lefties very, very well. A 340 batting average versus them this season, over a 600 slugging at 271 ISO, 426 open overall. Very strong numbers for Machado versus lefties, so I think he would be certainly playable, but don't really love picking on Urias here. And actually, third base is kind of loaded because we got Broseo here, we got Alex Bregman, we got Yandy Diaz, and there's a couple of other guys I thought were somewhat interesting, but I didn't want to list the entire third base group. Max Muncy is still third base eligible, right? You could throw him on there as well. But anyway, Broseo, he's got some pretty good numbers versus lefties this season with over a 400 ISO, 333 batting average. Does strike out quite a bit, but in your 200 WRC plus. So I think Michael Broseo is fine and should be leading off here versus lefty. He's very expensive, but if you are stacking up the Rays, I think he is viable. Alex Bregman seems a bit too cheap here. I prefer lefties versus Montas. The lefties grade out pretty well here on Houston today, but Bregman's just a bit too cheap. And the numbers versus righties haven't been great this year at all. Like a 200 batting average, but Bregman's still a good hitter, so 4,400 is not a bad price tag for him. And Yandy Diaz, 3,400. He's got some decent numbers here versus lefties. Not a lot of power, but a 265 batting average and near 450 on base percentage and a 24% walk rate. So I think he's fine for the price. Dropping down to shortstop, we have Corey Seager, who I love using versus right-handed pitching. He's fine versus lefties too, but versus righties, he's been pretty strong, and I do prefer lefties versus Chris Paddock, assuming he is the pitcher tonight for the San Diego Padres. And this is just one of the best offenses in baseball, if not the best. And Corey Seager, crushing righties, like I said, in your 300 ISO, a 333 batting average, only a 14% K rate, and over a 420 WOBA. So Corey Seager is viable. Tatis, he got robbed from losing my voice. Tatis got robbed by Cody Bellinger for a home run last night. I saw it because I was updating some stuff. And Belly certainly robbed him, so I mean, it sucks for him if you owned Tatis, but Tatis is great versus lefties, and I mean, it's one of the best players in baseball, so I think he's fine. I probably prefer Seager overall, but it's kind of splitting hairs there. And if you need the extra $100, Tatis is fine. And Gleyber Torres is just getting exposure to the Yankees. I mean, they're going to be one of the top stacks on the slate. I like that price point for Gleyber Torres. He's got pop versus lefties. Then Dansby Swanson at 3,500. He actually hits righties pretty well. We're taking a look at his splits really quick. So he's been actually brutal versus lefties, kind of like Mookie Betts. So Mookie Betts has been awful versus lefties. But to the righties, those numbers get a bit better. Over a 200 ISO, 136 WRC plus, a 300 batting average. So Swanson, I like that price tag at only 3,500. Then going down to the outfield, a lot of good options in the outfield today. We'll start with the two Yankees bats and Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. So Judge, he crushes lefties. I think that kind of speaks for itself. 430 ISO, just strong numbers. Yeah, Aaron Jones, speaking of football. Aaron Judge is obviously a good play here, but he is very pricey. I prefer Giancarlo Stanton just head-to-head just based off the price tag, because at 4,300, he has been on fire this postseason. It feels like he's homering pretty much every single day. And he crushes lefties. He's one of the best lefty mashers in the entire league so far this season. A 438 on base percentage versus them, a 333 ISO, 431 WOBA, and Giancarlo Stanton versus lefty at 4,300. So yeah, he's certainly going to be one of the better plays on this slate. Kyle Tucker, 3,100, just a lefty here versus Frankie Montas. If you're looking at Montas' numbers this season, He's got a near 500 WOBA to lefties, 267 WOBA to the righties. So we want lefties versus Frankie Montas. And his strikeout rate, it's actually a bit higher to the lefties, but still, I like the lefties here on the Astros. So Kyle Tucker is going to grade out pretty well here. He's got a 300 batting average versus righties this season and a near 300 ISO. So definitely like Kyle Tucker at that price point. Randy Rosarina has actually been pretty hot in this postseason as well. He's another guy that just seems like he's homering each and every single day. Very, very small sample size for him so far, but versus lefties, he's just murdering them. 400 batting average, a 600 ISO, a 600 WOBA, and 1,000 slugging. Again, smaller sample size, guys, but he's been on fire, and at 3,800 going up against a lefty, yeah, I think that's definitely a fine option there. Michael Brantley, 3,700, probably one of my favorite plays on the entire slate. He's always been a guy I love using versus righties. He's always a little bit too cheap. And he's just a solid hitter overall. Over a 200 ISO to righties this season, a 336 batting average, only a 13% K rate, and over a 400 WOBA. So Michael Brantley grades out very well for me, as we do want lefties versus Frankie Montas. Hunter Renfroe at 3,700. He does one thing well, and that's hit lefties for power. Everything else, he's pretty poor at it. He strikes out a lot, doesn't hit for a high batting average. But versus lefties, he's got one bright spot, and that's his 366 ISO versus them. So I think Hunter Renfroe is fine in a race stack, or just as a one-off, I guess. Manuel Margot at 3,600, another guy that's got okay numbers versus lefties. The batting average doesn't look too pretty at 229, yeah, 229. Sorry, I was getting confused with Hunter Renfroe. I was like, it's not that bad, 146. And like I said, though, Hunter Renfroe does one thing good, and that's hit lefties for power. Because, like I said, 146 batting average and 366 ISO. It's just about the only thing. Margot, a little bit more well-rounded there. Doesn't really strike out too much. He's fine, 3,600. Aaron Hicks, 3,500. I prefer him versus righties, but he's still okay versus lefties with a near 400 base percentage and a 243 batting average and only an 8% K rate. So at 3,500, I do like the Yankee stack. And Hicks is fine. Corey Dickerson, 3,000. Like him versus Kyle Wright here. I'm pretty sure in the regular season I really liked Corey Dickerson on a slate. He was facing Kyle Wright, and I'm pretty sure he did very well. I started the game off with a double, and I think he ended up finishing well. But Dickerson, he's a high contact guy versus right-handed pitching, and Kyle Wright's just not that great of a pitcher. Over a 400 WOBA to lefties, so Dickerson's fine. And Josh Reddick, he's just a cheaper lefty here versus Frankie Montas. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for the video. I hope it was helpful. Again, if some of these pitchers change, I do apologize, but this is what I had to work with as of right now. I actually started this video when the Padres game was still playing, so we'll see who their pitcher is going to be. Draftkings and Fangraphs has it as Chris Paddock, but that obviously could change. So if it happens to be a lefty, make sure you adjust these, because if it's a lefty, it's going to downgrade guys like, Corey Seager just a little bit, and Cody Bellinger and Max Muncy. So just keep that in mind, guys. But anyway, I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate that, and I think that's pretty much it. So I'll see you guys in the next one.